DJ Lovelies. This is Nisha M., your geek mom, and welcome to another episode of Diversely Geek Discusses, a space between planes where fans explore the meaning of being geek, learn what it means to identify and embrace your inner geek, and how connecting with geeks across the globe can help us on our journeys to transforming our fandom passions into positive action.
And hello, Diversely Geek Lovelies. This is Nisha M., your geek mom, coming to you with another episode of Diversely Geek Discusses. And today, we are joined by two, of course, fantabulous nerd geek science comic artists and everything under the sun. We have the wonderful, again, Roars, and we're doing a wave. You just can't see us doing it. Okay, so the wonderful Ada Zarate, coming to you from Mexico, comic book artist and author, just released her newest piece on Tapas. And we're also joined by Molly B. Marcus, a lifelong Whovian and a data nerd. Woohoo! Who is joining us for the first time here on Diversely Geek Discusses. Welcome!
Thank you. Hello.
And welcome to what is bound to be an amazing journey, because when Ada and I and Hey and Serengeti and Indiana start talking, we never know where it's going to go. So, yeah. So, I am so excited to have you on board. Molly is one of our regular featured guests on Doctor Who in Review, which is a weekly episode that is shared by Diversely Geek and Man Bites Media, and is very happy for us joining the team of the Diversely Geek world. And we have it's so exciting. We have a series in terms of how we're doing the episodes, Molly and Ada, and basically, you guys know we have Brain Steam, where we look at the science behind, and we have a lot of crazy stuff coming up with that. We do our My Geek Universe, which is an episode where we look in depth at the person who we're featuring as the guest, and we just look at their journey for that, that really has gotten them to where they are and how they've embraced their geek. And then we're also going to be doing feature episodes where we do four episodes where we really focus very strongly on the psyche and psychology behind that fandom, and why did we connect to it as a fan in the first place. So
sure.
That's going to be crazy. I know you're going to be coming on board, both of you, on some of those episodes. Yay! So,
yay.
We today are going to be talking about introducing a discussion on something that I think that, and there's a reason why I did ask you, other than you're fantabulous people. Also because, we're both, all three of us are of a different age. So generationally, what I'm looking at from our perspective, an honest, open conversation about the cultural influence of fandom. How has that changed our outlook on life? How is it how we see the world? Our roles, our even our gender roles, and our gender identity. And I know a lot of people would be trying to understand why I equate the two, but can you see, both of you, where it makes sense, or
sure.
not, where what we identify and we connect to really shapes who we are?
Oh, sure. Like from a very early age, like Ada, I've had comics and characters in my life forever. I was a very early reader. I used to spend a lot of time in the library. I loved all the monsters. I loved all the characters. I loved Dracula, especially even when I was little. For instance, like every Halloween, I wanted to be Dracula. My mom's like, "Don't you want to be a gypsy?" I'm like, "Nope, I want to be Dracula." So, and so for me, I'm kind of gender fluid anyway. So I go back and forth between different characters. To me, it doesn't matter if they're male or female. If I love them, I love them. So whether it's all the X-Men, or whether it's the really weird comics, or whether it's just different characters in movies, I tend to squee out. I do. I can't help it. It's just, to me, it's a feeling of great fulfillment and satisfaction. And it's not to the point of obsession. At least I don't think so. But it gets to the point where, like, I gotta know everything. I need to know, because curiosity, right? So I was always a very curious kid too. So.
Well, in my case, it's very funny, because although my parents were very, very, very open-minded, and well, my mom is one of the big feminists here in Mexico. Mexican culture is very strict with their gender roles. So when I was growing up, I always rotated towards the girls' characters. I was nothing like them. I was very much a tomboy. I hated makeup. I hated skirts. I hated everything girly. But my favorite characters were very girly. I adored the Smurfette. I adored Janine. Shira was my jam.
Oh, yes. Yeah, Shira Zena, who could not?
Jam was so fabulous, so outrageous. But it wasn't until I grew up and I was already drawing when I realized how important girl characters and representation is. And it was thanks to one of my fandoms. One of my fandoms, now I don't love it that much, but it still has a place in my heart, is Sailor Moon. Which is,
okay.
Of course, this girl power thing from the 90s. And that was really famous because it was one of the first cartoons in the Western world that had lesbian characters. Very funny, because I know that in the States they were cousins, but in Mexico they left them as lesbians. And cool. One of my very first conventions in a table in Mexico, when there come these two girls dressed as Sailor Uranus and Sailor Neptune, and tell me that they were very happy because of the magazine I was doing. Back then I was actually translating the Sailor Moon anime comic, because Sailor Moon gave them the strength to come out.
Oh, that's so cool.
Wow.
I still am very good friends with Sailor Uranus, who happens to be a very nice gentleman. But I don't know what happened to Sailor Neptune. But the thing was that it was the first step to say, hey, I'm different. And it's okay.
Yeah.
So that made me realize that first, because of my fandoms when I was a young girl, I shared more with American culture than with Mexican culture, because I never watched soap operas or the Mexican TV shows.
Oh, the telenovelas.
So I was very, very, very Americanized, even at a young age. And second, why is it important to show everything in entertainment? Hi, Haley.
So do you think, because you made a good point, because you actually brought up telenovela, and I'm actually, let me actually jump on that, because right now I'm going to say I identified very strongly, and I asked the question and then I have to answer it too, in a sense, right?
Sure,
I was looking about the cultural influence and how we see the world, our roles, our gender role, and our gender identity, and you both totally did a great job with that. And then it occurred to me, well, where did I learn to be so completely, unabashedly me versus any particular gender? I identify as a female. I have no problem with saying that. I completely do. I was a massive tomboy. I did not, except when I was told to, truly gravitate towards, because I am from an Asian Caribbean culture growing up in the U.S., so I definitely fell in line where I was supposed to. But then again, guess who I I identified with. I love She-Ra. She-Ra was huge in my life.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. But I was a huge fan of, things like Battlestar Galactica and Buck Rogers.
Oh my God, me too.
Oh my God, my life, Starbuck. I mean, give me a break. Everything about who I identified with, what I realized with was like, sure, there was a whole bunch of male characters, but you know what? I don't seem to have figured out as a kid that they were male characters. I just saw them as characters. Right? Does that make sense?
Me too.
And I was like,
yep,
these
totally.
are great characters. I can do this thing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I don't know where that happened. It just happened.
I'll give you a funny story. So, funny story. So my brother had those cool racetracks with the cars, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I always wanted to play with those, and he had these big Tonka trucks, and I always wanted to play with those. And my mom would get me these like 1970s Barbie. I think it was like the Sunshine Family. Like you can make your own like macrame plant holder thing. I'm like, Mom, I don't want to. I want the Tonka truck. So for me, it was like, so she was beside herself because, that generation, they're like, you have gender specific toys. And it wasn't that she wanted me to be like, girly or anything, but I think it really confused her. And,
it was gender expectations.
Yeah. And so, and I came out to her when I was like 14 or so. And so she didn't quite know what to do. But at the same time, to me, I will identify just as well with a female character as I will with a male character. Like, I love Xena. Xena's badass.
It's amazing.
Oh,
yes.
Lucy
Wallace, life. Sorry.
Oh,
go ahead.
Oh my God, she's so amazing. Anyway, but another strong character, I love Wolverine. So I love these different characters because their stories are so rich, right? And I think for me, my squeedom comes from these deep characters. I think it's why I like Doctor Who so much too. It's just, you have these rich, delicious characters that you can just sink your teeth into and you're like, yeah, I like this.
That's amazing. But
I also have a story about genders.
I was just wanting you to think about one real quick thing as you tell that story. Let me ask you. We grew up in a generation where the telenovela the soap opera extremely prevalent and extremely strong contextual influence in terms of our life, because it's what our mothers, aunts, and sisters.
Yep.
I'm doing quotes
all my children
with my hand, just so you know. I'm making quotes here. It was contextual reference. Yep. So when you look back at that, how much of that did you buy into, not buy into? Because again, it was cultural reference. So go ahead. Next story.
Well, first my story, because I remember about genders. And I told you this in chat once.
Yeah.
So when I was in high school, I had a very cool literature teacher who didn't like the obligatory reading list in Mexico, which was basically the same stories as the telenovelas. I never liked telenovelas because they are basically Cinderella.
Yeah.
All Mexican telenovelas are Cinderella, with very few exceptions. It's basically, you have to stay at home, you have to be a good wife, and then one day, one rich guy is going to fall in love with you.
Scoop you up, yeah.
I hated that. So
those are called Harlequin romances, just to say. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
The book that he gave us to read was The Hobbit. I absolutely fell in love with The Hobbit. I fell in love with Tolkien.
Yes.
So, of course, I had to ask my father to buy me Lord of the Rings.
Oh, yeah.
And I was starting to read in English. I taught myself to English, because English in Mexican schools is terrible. It's a horrible class. You never learn anything. And I was teaching myself by reading comics with a dictionary. So my dad gave me the first book of Lord of the Rings in English, and I was very, very happy. But I could not understand it, so my mom got it to me in Spanish. And I started reading in Spanish, and don't ask me why, but I was completely convinced during the whole fellowship and half of the 2 towers that Mary was a girl. because Mary was a girl's name in Mexico.
And
So
what
Mary
happened
had
when you
to be a
realized?
girl, and she was Pippin's wife.
Oh my God! What?
Yes, you could not convince me otherwise. And I checked that translation because I asked my friends, my Mexican friends who had read the same, and they went, yes, Mary is a girl. Or that they turned him into a guy in the movie.
What? So wait, it was translated that way?
It was translated in a way that for some reason, they never mentioned Mary's gender.
That's really curious.
They call them the cousins, but the problem is that in Spanish, the male is the default. So if I have a male cousin, we are going to be primos anyway, even if I'm a woman. So Meriadoc and his cousin Pippin was translated to Spanish as Mary y su primo Pippin. So that didn't say that Mary was a boy.
Oh.
It is not until they get separated
Fantastic.
in the two towers when they start talking about Mary with gender nouns. I was very disappointed that there was no girls in the fellowship then.
Oh my God.
Oh, well, yeah.
Because for me it was very obvious. Mary is a girl.
Sort of.
Okay, so my brain is latching onto that. I'm going, the thing is we read in our language, in this language, whatever the language is, and you're right. Culturally and socially, the content has to be translatable, and then the reference has to be according to the language it's being translated to. So then it changes the influence of the character.
Sure does. Sure does.
Unfortunately, many times, but at least in Mexican translation, because we don't have time to translate, and I say we because now I am a professional translator, and now I understand why these things happen. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we don't have
How fascinating.
The context. So, for example, and this is a much modern example, the other day I was in a mix-up, that's a DVD store, and I found the Supernatural Season 7 DVD, which clearly states in Spanish that Castiel is a young female angel that helps Dean to fight against the Leviatans.
Where'd that come from? Okay, go ahead. Okay.
I have no idea how it's turned into Castiel, an angel helping Dean, into Castiel, una ángel, which is female,
yes,
in Spanish, helping Dean. I have no idea, but I am pretty sure that the poor guy who had to translate that box has never seen Supernatural.
Oh my God, yeah, no.
Probably read that Misha was the actor playing Castiel, and because Misha ends with an A, and in Spanish, if your name ends with an A, it's a female name.
It's female, oh my gosh.
So Castiel must be a female angel.
So Misha Collins ended up being female. Hey, I don't think Misha Collins would mind that very much.
I'm pretty sure that if they ever get to
pretty
tell
sure we'd be all cool with that. That's a great story. I hope you tell Misha this, because that he will be totally down and tickled at that one. That's just fascinating. You just totally blew my mind. I think Molly's too. What?
Yeah.
Wait a
pretty
second.
much.
So what's interesting is I grew up reading extremely voraciously, and I don't know if you guys know any reference to this, but we had some things called the Chinacata series. And so when I was a kid, my parents would get me those. And those are Indian folklore.
Cool.
Indian folklore, but in comic books. So I have
neat.
hundreds and hundreds of them. So we would read the cultural folklore across Asia that was translated into stories. So we read our stories of the Mahabharata, the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, the Ramayana, all of these, the major historical spiritual stories. But mixed into that, we had all the superhero and the super culturally related stories of all these amazing characters that were built in, and they were called the Chinacata. So it was so interesting to me. Yeah, see? Now you're making me think. Because when you think about that, when I was reading those, I'm reading it from the perspective of the language that it's originally translated from, right?
Sure,
So translated
sure.
from the 108 Indian languages into this English, so I read that. But then
Wow.
those stories are then translated here, and they got changed. And it's for a fact, when they were translated into English text, contextual text, originally stories got changed, and you're right, genders got changed. So that's
Wow.
It's a very funny thing. I mean, I have now been working in one of my comics, the one that actually updates tomorrow. I have a gender neutral character. It is really hard for me to write this character in Spanish because Spanish has gender pronouns. And in fact, I realized then that for my friends in Mexico, it's very hard to understand the concept of a neutral gender person.
Wow.
A gender neutral person, sorry, because our language is completely built around everything having gender.
Exactly.
Yes.
Houses are female, buildings are male. Don't ask me how that works.
Well, you have neutral too in Spanish too, right?
The moon is female, the sun is male, water is female, except that we use male pronouns for it. It's very complicated, but still water is female. So it goes, and almost every single cat is male. I mean, we know that we have female cats, but we call them male cats because female cat is an insult.
Oh, yeah.
So amazing. So then basically, and you can jump in, Molly. I mean, so
sure.
how we learn and how we integrate the knowledge from that learning is going to, without a question, have to do with paradigm shifting, like we were discussing in our last podcast.
Yeah.
So this is amazing. I mean, I think we have similar upbringings, I think, correct? Aren't we both from the North?
Yeah, I'm from Chicago originally.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing too. You know, we're talking about cultural influences, gender influences. I was 2 when Sesame Street came out, and even the early episodes of Sesame Street, you had these little monsters, you had these little Muppets, right?
Yep.
And some had gender, but some didn't. Grover was the name Grover, but we never knew if Grover was really male or female. We didn't know if Cookie Monster was really male or female. So all of a sudden you start to have these influences of these characters that are genderless. Like, look at Bert and Ernie. They're probably the longest running gay couple in cartoons, even though they were just friends. But I think we all know better. But it's but I think that
my brain freeze today. Okay, go.
But and you have that and the Electric Company and Zoom, and you have Mr. Rogers and Captain Kangaroo, and you have like all of a sudden this huge explosion of kid programming, including Saturday morning cartoons, which were like a religious experience for me until they got really bad. I couldn't wait to get up early in the morning, turn on the TV, have my bowl of cereal, and watch Hanna-Barbera and watch Scooby-Doo before it got silly with Scrappy-Doo. I mean, like the original Scooby-Doo.
Amen.
And so to me, that was just, I couldn't wait for the school week to be done. But I also, on the flip side of that, would spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours in the library reading H.P. Lovecraft, reading Nancy Drew, reading like all these like crazy books because I was
Hardy Boys.
voracious. all of them. Agatha Christie, all of them.
Oh, Agatha Christie.
Hercule Poirot.
Mm-hmm. Yes, okay. Hercule. I love Hercule Poirot.
Okay, I'm just convinced we're almost the same person, but we're just born in 2 different places. Okay, keep going.
I'm just amazed that you were born in Chicago because my biggest fandom is baseball, and I love the White Sox.
Oh, wrong team!
Oh my gosh!
Said the Cubs.
Have this conversation.
Cubs are my second team.
You can explain that. Go ahead.
Oh, we always call the White Sox the fake team because it's really about the Cubs.
I know.
That was shade, man. That was shade.
Can I make a small commercial for my comics?
Sure, of course.
Oh, yeah, please.
Okay, because you're going to like this. So my team is the White Sox for a long, long story. But one of my comics, the one that updates on Wednesdays, it's a baseball comic about a team that plays with ghosts. It's that plays with ghosts, and it's called the Afterlife League, because every single player gets to play baseball forever in the Afterlife League.
Whoa!
The manager of the Traveling Sears, that's the name of the team, the human team that plays against these ghosts, is Murphy the goat that cursed the Cubs.
That's awesome.
You can see the goat. It appears first as a mascot, then you find out that he is actually the manager. Because
it's that darn goat.
He's to tell you stories about baseball, and of course I had to tell the story about the goat. But the funny thing is that originally published in Spanish, the goat chapter about the curse on 215. And everybody in Mexico loved the goat and started sending messages about how this was the year that the goat's curse was going to be broken, to the point that I have an Indian goat. So now I am getting the credit in Mexico for my readers that I was the one who broke the curse because I made the goat happy, because he's now the manager.
Yes. Well, we have you to thank then for the World Series.
Yay!
Wednesdays.
That's awesome. Oh, darn goat.
Darn goat. Oh my God, this is awesome. This is just so good. The things you learn. So,
right?
Basically, I've come, okay, so there is no question here. None of us actually have any predisposition to gender tropes of any kind, because it seems like none of us grew up with any predisposition to gender tropes.
No, like even when I'd watch like Justice League, on Saturday afternoon, for instance, and I'd see all the different superheroes. I liked Wonder Woman, but I didn't feel like I had to like Wonder Woman. You know what I mean? Like I didn't feel like I had to identify with Wonder Woman.
Whoa! Of course you have to like Wonder Woman, because Wonder Woman is amazing.
Oh, she is. Hands down. I love Wonder Woman. But I'm just saying, like, I can identify just as much with, Aquaman, not really because he was kind of lame in the cartoon, but I'm just saying, like, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I'd be like, oh, okay. It was like the Wonder Twins annoyed me. I was not like really into the Wonder Twins, but I like the adventures. I mean, I loved her invisible jet. I'm like, she's cool. She has a jet. All you see is her flying around in the sky. That's pretty interesting. She's still a target though. but I always wondered why, like, her jet was invisible, but she wasn't. You'd think that the jet would make her invisible too.
So you're so right about that.
What was 3 years ago, I think, in Comic-Con, 2 years when the movie came out, they made this great exhibit at Comic-Con, at San Diego Comic-Con, in which you could take your picture with the invisible plane.
Yeah, they did. That was my first year there, as a matter of fact.
And it was an empty place that only had a little sign that said, "The invisible jet is parked here."
That is
That's
so
hilarious. No, I thought, like, speaking of fandoms, when the movie came out with Gal Gadot, I absolutely squeed. I thought it was fabulous. I thought she did a great job.
Yes, she did. She did an amazing job.
Yeah.
And you're right about the fact that look, as you know, I'm a huge Wonder Woman fan, but it was because I had started reading Wonder Woman from the get-go, and I was reading about a character who wasn't sexualized and to the extent that she became. I was reading about the warrior, the Amazonian warrior.
Yes.
And to me, that is what I, without a doubt, identified with. And going back to Justice League, we get treated to the history of Diana, of Themyscira, and we get to understand how powerful of a character she is, and how much restraint she has to practice to be able to be in the mortal world. And so I, without any question, there was never a doubt to me. The one thing I always remembered with Justice League, they had this conversation as to who would have to take out who if any of them went rogue. Remember when they were having the clones were happening?
Yes.
And remember that? And so they made a decision, and I'm sorry to be morbid here, but they had made a decision because you're talking about Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. And they made a decision that between the three of them, the last one would be her, because she was the only one who had the ability to, and the strength and the will to be able to make the appropriate decisions. You remember that?
Yeah.
And
yes, I do.
I thought that for me just completely fractionated my way of looking at my place in the world. I mean,
right, because there were these glimpses in the 70s, of that empowerment. And but did you notice they still didn't have a lot of female roles?
No,
they just didn't. And in some ways, this is probably an unpopular opinion, but I still feel that in the comic world, there could be stronger female characters. I still feel that they are still highly sexualized. And look at even She-Hulk, all of them, they could be better, right? And I think that we're starting to see that evolve a bit more, especially with the independent comics and the other things. But I want to see the mainstream. I want to see DC. I want to see Marvel. I want them to see them combat that, and to have those role models.
Sorry. Unfortunately, and I can say this from the industry because I actually work for Upper Deck. That is one of my happy things. The problem is that creators try, and I mean a lot of creators, even creators who are accused of only thinking about sexualizing characters, they try. But there is this minority of fans who just won't let us. I mean, for example, Marvel has right now the amazing Kamala Khan.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Good Lord.
If you and I say this to anyone who's hearing.
Marvel Rising is brilliant. Just
if
brilliant.
You are not reading Miss Marvel, you are missing one of the greatest comics of all times. Diana agrees. You have Spider-Man, whom, despite Frank Cho's biggest attempts, is not really sexualized in her comic. In fact, a lot of Spider-Gwen's issues come from the fact that she suddenly found out that in many different universes, she's this lost Leonore for Peter Parker, and she doesn't want to be just that. It's a very meta thing. You have Gwenpool, which could not be less sexualized if they tried, despite the fact that it looks like a gimmick for Deadpool's for Deadpool popularity. But no, she's a very strong character, and I love her, especially now. I have always loved her, but right now in West Coast Avengers, she actually makes a mention about how for being a superhero, they are in a reality show, she has to play up a romance with one of her teammates to get cameras. So he is completely in love with her, but she is like, oh, no, I only talk to you and I only kiss you because I want to be in the spotlight. And I know that being a comic character, the only way to survive is to be in the spotlight. The fact that you have these comments, DC, I have admittedly not read much DC because I kind of boycotted them when they killed my favorite characters. But you have Bachelor of Burnside, which was the first time I saw.
I love Buckaroo Banzai.
Oh gosh, yeah, absolutely.
Tried to undo Killing Joke. And that was a big attempt. They didn't make it, but they tried to. So, yeah.
Well, even in Buckaroo Banzai, sorry, I just got to interject this real quick. Even in Buckaroo Banzai, you still had Penny, and you still had her as a weak female. I didn't like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I agree completely. One of my absolute favorite fandoms is Lost in Space from the original.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the strangest thing because it's extremely gender
yes,
suppressive in a sense, the original, but at the same time, they still somehow had the wherewithal to make the female character still strong. And this is back when did they originally create Lost in Space? And now what they've done with it is stupendous. It's just perfectly stupendous because with the new retelling of it, the culture of it is extremely gender fluid. There's no character who has to be any specific gender other than how it's already been told, if that makes sense. So it's such a wise way to look at telling a story. And I think that that's something that, for instance, the three of us, which is why I thought this would be a great conversation, would completely welcome to have that type of story.
I just thought, now that you mentioned Lost in Space, one of my oldest fandoms that I didn't inherit from my parents, and that had a reboot that did everything wrong. And that was B. I don't know if you remember B.
The who?
The B. It was called B. It was a miniseries about fascist lizards coming to conquer Earth in the 80s.
I'm going to have to look it up.
Oh, V, the letter V.
Oh, V, yes. V for victory, girl.
Yes.
I could quote you almost every episode of V. Sorry.
Yes, I love V.
Oh, my God,
It was amazing. But what was more amazing, and it's so topical now, but anyway, the thing is that what I remember the most of the original miniseries, besides Robert Englund and the reason why I will never fear Freddy Krueger, was Jodie. Jodie was a scientist who suddenly became the leader of the rebellion. No one ever doubted her leadership, not in the miniseries, not in the full series. You had people like Michael Ironside coming as a character, and he never doubted that she was the leader, that she called the shots. There was never an episode of, oh, well, but she's a female and we need a strong man leading us. Never.
No, never. Never did it exist as part of the language.
And not only that you also had Diana, that although she was taken out by a male leader in the lizard side, she always proved that she was far more capable than all of the males.
Yep.
So you had a series in which the two leaders of the two sides were women.
That's correct.
More important than that, in the original series, after Jodie leaves her boyfriend, which was an amazing scene, when he goes, well, but you are a scientist and you are costing me my reputation, and she goes, yeah, fuck you.
No, excuse my language.
It's just that I love Jodie so much.
Blooper. Okay, go ahead.
Blooper, sorry. Thing is, where I was going, at some point they shoot at her in the hip.
Oh.
And from then on, you always see her with a cane. They never forget the cane. And she's still the leader, and no one thinks that she's less because she cannot walk normally. They let her have a scar of war. Not only that, in many shots you see her with the makeup running or without makeup. She was allowed to be a person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that in the 80s was amazing.
Yeah.
So, of course, when they made the remake and they take away any female character's leadership, because the leaders of the rebellion are a male, in which all the women are perfectly make up and perfectly safe all the time, I go like, that's the whole point of B.
Yeah. Well, look at like the Next Generation, right? You got Crusher, you got Marina, you got all these characters. They're absolutely perfect. They're absolutely skinny. Their hair is not out of place, And then you got also like the holodeck, right? I love Star Trek. I'm a big Trekkie fan too, but I couldn't identify with them.
My grandmother
I identified with
the new generation.
Yeah. I identified with Patrick Stewart. I like Patrick Stewart.
How can you not? No, I had a lot of issues with Beverly Crusher as a character. I think a lot of times they gave her the prowess to be the brilliant person she was supposed to be. Because remember, she's a doctor.
Yeah.
She's also a technologist, and she had the ability to command the Enterprise. And she was a diplomat. So if you put all the pieces of Beverly Crusher together, I don't feel like they highlighted the strength of her character the way that they could have at all.
No, they didn't.
I think that number one had way too much sexualization going on, and I thought it was not necessary. And
mummification.
And mummification, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't remember all my grandmother's rants about the new generation because I admit at some point I started just blocking her because, man, she could rant. But one of the things that I remember the most was that she hated that how could Uhura, who was always in a miniskirt and whose role basically to repeat the computers, what the computer said, be more independent and less sexualized, even dancing half naked with fans, than all of the crew in the new generation.
So I wrote a piece.
It was the leotard.
Yeah, I wrote a short piece on Diversely Geek. If you check the page, you'll see it on Lieutenant Uhura, because I went back I've been doing I'm working on writing a book. A short, one of the things, novelization, where we're looking at the strength of these female characters. And I looked at it and I realized when I went back and I looked at the history of who Uhura was, we had no idea how completely brilliant Uhura was as a character. So here we are thinking all she's doing is reading back what she's hearing in a communications counter, but basically she wrote most of that language. Basically, had the ability to rebuild every bit of the structure that was on that was on the deck of the Starship Enterprise. She had the ability to pilot the ship. She also had the ability. I learned she was a multilinguist. I learned so much about her. It's an amazing article.
Uhura was amazing. My grandmother loved her.
Click on the link. It's so amazing.
I will always say.
Well, it's.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the only action figure / maybe sort of Barbie dolls, but they're not Barbies, so they're not Barbie dolls. I have the Wizard of Oz dolls, the Walton dolls, but I have Lieutenant Uhura and the alien.
Yes.
She's missing her shoes, but I still have her.
Yes.
I need to get myself an Uhura in honor of my grandma. I met Nicole Nicholson at San Diego Comic-Con, and it was amazing. But I have to say, my grandma was the very first Spock Uhura shipper.
Oh, wow.
Oh, really?
Even before the movies. She never got to see the new movies because she died before they came out. So I am sure that she was in heaven yelling, yes, I told you.
Let's reference that because we are huge Trekkies here, obviously. And the culture of your mother's love for Star Trek,
grandmother,
the dynamic from the original writings, do you not think that influenced how she then raised you, Ada, and gave you?
Well, she was my grandmother, not my mother. And absolutely, I am pretty sure that part of her choice of becoming a head nurse instead of staying as a nurse, because she was a head nurse, was because of Human and because of Dr. McCoy. Because she loved Dr. McCoy.
Yeah.
And she could not be a doctor. Again, she was a woman in the 30s in Mexico, in the 50s when she actually started watching Star Trek. That was not a career that was open for her. But becoming head nurse, that was something that she could reach. And I am pretty sure She was also one of the very few women of her generation that divorced. That was not done in my grandmother's time. She raised my father alone. So I think that most of it, she didn't say it out loud because she was also a little bit ashamed of her geekiness. She shared it with me and with my dad, of course, but never with visits. So it was very interesting to see that generation, how her generation, 3 generations away from me, reacted about that. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that a lot of what she did and a lot of what she told me, she kept telling me, don't let anyone tell you you cannot do something because you're a girl. And she constantly pointed at Uhura as a role model. Except, of course, when she kissed Kirk. She didn't like that. Not because it was an interracial kiss. It was because, of course, Kirk did not deserve Uhura.
Right. Well, I think... Sorry, go ahead.
If it had been with Spock, she would have been on heaven.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Hansi, not too long ago on Instagram, had this picture. I can't tell if it's a little girl or a little boy, but they're holding a sign that says "Respect my existence" or "Expect my resistance."
Yes.
And I love that, because I think that part of the reason why I was excited about Jodie for Doctor Who was for younger, cis women or cis, female identifying people that are younger, and I'm talking under the age of, 12, have a positive role model. I mean, there's just so few positive role models that are smart and clever and scientific and inventive, And I think that's so important. I personally have raised a son, but as a single mom, he is much more in tune, obviously, with more female-sided things than not. Did he lack male role models? Probably. But he gets his own through his own experimentation and his own way that he looks at the world, right? And all I always wanted to do was to teach respect, right? To be respectful of your elders, to be respectful of others, especially yourself, So, kind of getting back to the topic, where, we're talking about how gender and our fandom and the things that we love that bring us joy influence us. I go back to my Star Wars figures that I had. I used to play with my brother, who was 3.5 years younger than I was. Huge Star Wars fan ever since it came out. We went to the movies as a family in 1970-aught, and we would spend hours with those. And he would make me be Princess Leia. And I'm like, well, why do I have to be Princess Leia? Not that I didn't want to be Princess Leia, but I could be. But I'm like, I want to be Luke. And my brother, who's younger than me, was like, well, no, you have to be Leia because you're a girl. I was like, I don't have to do anything. And we get into these huge fights, just absolutely huge fights. Yeah. So instead, I would take my giant Tinker Toys, and I would make a giant Titanic, and then I'd make him sink it. So I was kind of like Wednesday Addams, and he was kind of like Pugsley growing up. But there you go.
My brother, unfortunately, it's the opposite of me in many ways. He's a jock. If you have seen Revenge of the Nerds,
oh sure,
he pretty much the jocks.
No.
But the funny thing, yeah, it's terrible. But the funny thing is that I can see a lot of influence on the things that I know he watched when he was a kid. A lot of the fandoms that he still holds dear to his heart, even if he claims he doesn't. in what he does. For example, when he was a little boy, he always loved Saint Seiya, Caballeros del Zodiaco in Spanish, a Japanese anime. You can see it on Netflix, I think. Netflix, please give us money. But the thing is that the main thing of that show was that the main characters were friends. And they claimed that no one leaves a friend behind. If your friends need you, you never leave a friend behind. No matter what, you fight for your friends. And my brother has this big thing about his team. He practices Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He never leaves his friends. He contacts them every single win he does. He dedicates it to them. And I'm like, yeah, you got that from Saint Seiya. You didn't get that from your horrible football coach. You didn't get that from your baseball coach because you don't remember your baseball coach.
Yeah.
You didn't get that from your jiu-jitsu coach because you were already old enough then. You got it from Saint Seiya, from that show that you watched when you were 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole, I want to be the strongest and I'm going to train to be the strongest. I am never going to stop training because my body is my temple. You got that from your favorite character in Saint Seiya, Shiryu the Dragon, which also explains your tattoos. And then he yells at me and stops talking to me for 3 days.
Yeah. So you ask a question, how can we change the narrative, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of it is having these kinds of discussions like we are now, perhaps pushing more panels like these at the cons. Ada's doing great work with her comics. So I think, each little bit helps chip away at some of those things. And I think as the generations continue to go forward and hopefully in less conservative climates, the narrative will ebb and flow as societies ebb and flow, and as societies get more open. Even though right now everyone feels like they're shut down. But, narrative only changes when we keep our minds open. If we don't keep our minds open, then the narrative will always stay the same.
Absolutely. And Ada, that last question?
I am thinking about it, how to change. Part of it, I think it's already starting to change. We have new creators who have thought about it. We have new shows that are trying to make things different. So basically what I think is that we have to take all the positives that we had, not focus so much on the negatives, but concentrate on the positives and try to give them to the new generations.
Agreed.
To keep raising, to keep helping the baby geeks, the baby nerds, the baby fanboys and fangirls, and help them find their places and their stories, not trying to force them to like what we liked.
Right.
But let them find their Star Trek, their Star Wars, their She-Ra. Okay, yes, some of them have reboots that they will probably like now. But if they tell us, hey, look at this Adventure Time, or look at this Steven Universe, or look at this whatever, instead of going, oh, well, in my time, cartoons were better, or whatever, give them a chance. Look at them, watch them, study them. And we're probably going to find something new we like. And
look at all the anime. Yeah.
I absolutely agree. I know. And that's why it's such a pleasure to be able to find, wonderful people who understand who I am as a being, because again, there's this cultural perspectives, there's gender perspectives, there's social perspectives. And so we're part of this new generational movement towards an entirely new perspective of existence and living.
Yes.
So I have a philosophy, and I that we have a Diversely Geek, and I say it's acceptance, not expectance. I know expectance isn't a word, but it's what I say.
It works.
It's acceptance, not expectance. I think if we just, I don't think I know. If we strip away the expectations of labels and tropes, as it were, then what we start doing is we start to find each other to be humans and individuals. And
I love that.
We find the personalities that we connect to because we connect to them, not because we're expected to connect to them. So in that same way, whatever, and the funny thing is we talked about our fandoms today, and most of it was from the TV, the comic book series, along those lines. But there are hundreds of fandoms out there that don't fall into what people label as a fandom, right? I mean, there's all forms of art and culture. There's needlepoint, for goodness sakes, and we have seamstresses, and we have painters, and we have architects, and we have horticulturists, and I mean, just so many things. And what we need to do is we have to, I guess, what could we do? Changing the narrative, is us, like, embrace the diversity that's out there, and for us, don't box people into what it means to be geek, even.
Yes.
And what it means to actually be a nerd, and I'm cool with being it because I am happy with being that person.
Yep.
Because I'm good with it, and I want so much that people would embrace their geek. That's the whole point to who we are, But I think it's where gender inclusion comes in, because it becomes a fluid conversation and fluid content. It's no longer about who do I expect you to be. So that's why I'm going to touch really quick. That's why Into the Spider-Verse was so fantastic.
Oh, I still have to see it. I haven't seen it yet.
It's groundbreaking.
You have to watch it. It's gorgeous, wonderful, amazing, spectacular, and very friendly.
And you'll see exactly what I'm saying, because there's not one moment that's written where there's any gender expectations, role classifications.
Oh, cool.
Classifications. They are characters because they're characters. And
nice.
So you see it from that world. If you see it correctly, then you'll understand that that's what they're saying. It is pure brilliance. And I know that if they can do that with something as brilliant as this, they can do it with anything they want to. It's just,
sure.
I guess we have to change the voice, right? Basically.
Well, it's getting, it's getting like the sponsors, like we were talking about in the other podcast, the sponsors, the advertisers, the people who hold purse string. We need to find different purse string.
That is a really good point. That is a beautiful point. So then we're going to continue. Well, we were supposed to have a 40-minute conversation, and we have gone way past that, because that's when we talk. No, I'm happy. I wasn't sure. But, I mean, this is amazing. That's the point to this particular conversation. There is so much to be said as we learn and we look at who we are. Personally, the guests that we have on, we just reveal so much to ourselves, and then, of course, to the listeners at the same time.
Sure.
So I think that we're going to continue having this conversation. If both of you are on board to continue with me as we explore this journey and trying to bring this out to the world. And Ada and I are very much going to be bringing this out to the world as panels. Correct, Ada?
Yes, we are.
That's what we're working on. And changing the language through some literary work we're working on.
Fantastic.
And Ada's doing that already, so I'm excited for that. So I'm so happy to have had you on today, Molly. It was just
yes, it's been a pleasure.
Beautiful reference, and I'm hoping you'll I'm hoping you'll be on again, and happy to be part of the continued conversation. And
absolutely.
Yeah, this it's just very relevant and very necessary. So thank you both, and we will be uploading pretty soon to our Diversely Geek Discusses podcast sites, where you can find us on iTunes. You can find us on Spotify and Stitcher and Alexa and Google Play, a whole bunch of other places. But very quickly, Ada, why don't you go ahead and let us know how we can find your comic book work?
Well, you can find me on Ada Lisa Zarate which I cannot spell because my spelling in English is terrible, in Facebook.
Zarate. So it's on the it's on the description. You'll find it.
Yeah, much better. Or you can find me on Calico Chimera. That's my website, calicochimera.com, where there are links to every single one of my of my comics, or at tapas.eo/ I think Adalisa. I am pretty sure it's Adalisa. I should learn my own ORs.
Yeah. I forget mine too. It's all good.
Then basically in Tapas, I am going to tell you right now because I remember I have a computer in my hands. I can check it. Yeah, it's Adalisa.
Okay.
Tapas.Adalisa, and there you have Mondays, Dream Keeper Robin, Tuesdays, Gradients, Wednesday, Traveling Sears, Thursdays, Building Blocks. I draw too much.
So, and then Molly, do you have anything coming up?
No, I mean, just the Doctor Who in review with you guys and whatever else I do with you here at Diversity Geek. I am working on an A to Z kids book, but it's not ready for prime time yet. So.
Yes, I'm actually working on which Ada's kind of like giving me feedback on. I have launched also a story. That's amazing. Look at this. You don't want to tell us anything about the book? What's the story? Or do you want to wait and then we'll just talk about it when you're ready?
Well, we'll wait until it's a little bit more ready.
Okay, cool. Well, you have us here. You know, we're like totally the platform. We're gonna get everybody to read what everyone reads. Yes. Okay, so everyone, this is Nisha. I'm your geek mom, also known as Nisha T. Molchan, your science geek nerd, nurse practitioner, neuropsychiatry specialist. Yay! And huge geek, as the whole world knows. Point in life, and asking you, everyone out there, to embrace your inner geek, express your inner geek, and then transform that bend and passion into positive action. And guys, let's change the narrative. Let's step outside of labels, and let's make a change in the world, and let people know that this is what we want to see. This is the change that we need made. So it's all in our hands, right? So, yep. Signing off, and you guys know how to find us at Diversity Geek, every social media platform that's out there. Yay! Oh, Yay. And the website has launched, and we are putting up original content articles, so everyone's welcome. You guys definitely ought to, Molly, if you ever want to put up an article on the website, please just shoot it on over. Awesome. I will be so happy to have it up there. So, okay, thank you, and we are signing off from Diversity Geek, and we will see you next week for another episode. Have a great week, everyone.
Have a great one. You too.
Bye-bye.